Monster Cutie! Back in the house. Okay, folks. So this is part 4 of our Snacking Cutie walkthrough. I'm definitely going to change the title of this piece because I think the title will help explain the narrative a little bit. I mean, it is kind of cute to see a little guy with a bloody sock in his mouth, but I think I like the composition, but I'm not sure it tells the story that I want it to. I guess this is something additional that I have to work on. But anyway, enough second guessing. Today we are going to start laying in some color, and for that we're going to take a look at our references just a little bit. I have them all opened up in preview, some of these clearing photos. And one of the things that I notice is there's a lot of light shining through and playing around down here, so I'm gonna play with that a little bit in here. But I don't know, these give me a good idea of a color palette to start off with. Lots of greens and browns, and I like how these greens are nice and saturated. The overall tone of this particular photo has a very warm feel to it. This one is kind of cooler, so I don't know, but I don't know what I'm gonna end up with. I'm definitely gonna be cooling off parts of the background because I want the cuties to stand out most, but this sort of gives us an idea. So we could cheat and bring these photos into our composition, blur them, and swatch colors off of that, but let's be creative. Alright, so to start off, we are going to create a new layer on top of all of these layers, and we're eventually going to get rid of this layer or merge it with the other ones, and we'll set its mode to color. And we're going to just basically do some big swatches of stuff. And I like to use the color picker. So to access the color picker, all you have to do is click on the swatch down here, and you have the hue slider, and then this is the saturation and black level area that you can fiddle around with in here. And I'm gonna start off with sort of like a neutral brownish tone. Okay, and then get a brush, our handy dandy spatter brush, and just start laying in color. Why are we having slowdown issues here? Confused. Why is it doing that? Maybe we'll just use a opacity brush here. Alright, so what I'm doing is just laying in basic color. I'm not going to worry too much about shading. We'll get to that. This kind of gives it a chrome feel to it. Like there's no variation in the colors. It's all as if you put a brown filter over everything. Doesn't look so great. No, we don't want that. We need a little bit more saturation here. And possibly some green. Now when you're setting a layer to color over a grayscale sketch in the background, you want to keep the colors fairly saturated and then dial them back down. But to start off, the colors are going to be somewhat saturated, because if you go too subtle, it's going to end up looking just like your gray sketch. So if I wanted this muted green and started painting that in, it would look a little bit too grayish. So and then maybe some bluish tones for the rocks here. I forget, is that branch or is that rock? Who knows? There's some more brown action going on here. Alright, and for the cuties, I don't know, maybe I was initially thinking that they would be kind of a dark orange. Which kind of looks cute. Maybe bluish hats. I don't know, maybe a little bit more yellowy in the middle parts. Well, whatever. So that looks fairly disgusting. But if you zoom out, you can see that we've got sort of some rough colors going in there. From very far away, it doesn't look terribly bad. We got some general areas of color. It's not really a unified scheme right now, but that's okay. So now what we're gonna do is we're gonna go back to, we're gonna copy this guy, and we're gonna stick one version in the background, and we're going to cut out a version for the foreground. So let's see, control click or Apple click, and then right click in here and add transparency mask, and up on this layer that we're copying, let's see, control J to cut it out, delete it, and then let's stick this in the foreground here. So we have a foreground version, and this is what's going on in the background. So let's work on the background a little bit more, tone down this color layer. Alright, now there are a couple of ways to approach the next step. Of course, we're going to go in and sort of even things out and paint in some real values right now instead of this overlay crap. But we want to also be able to work on it without like making a stroke and then waiting for the computer to update. So let's check on our file size. Let's see how big this guy is. Monster Cutie, Snacking Cutie, Snacking Cutie. It's 92 megs. Okay, that's not, or 99 megs. That's not terribly bad. All right, so what we're gonna do, normally I would flatten this all down and start painting directly on it, but I think what I'm gonna do is create a new layer. All right, so we're gonna call this the, whoops. It's always good to label your layers, just so you have an idea of where you are in your composition. You need a roadmap. We're gonna call this the colorized layer, and then we're gonna call this top layer the overpaint. So basically, now that we have our guidelines with our gray tones and our our rough color outline, we're gonna go nuts and we're just gonna overpaint this. So overpaint literally means painting over. And this section is looking too homogeneous and too green. I don't want that. I want it to kind of fade out into the background, and you notice in all of our sample photos, as things go towards the background, they kind of meld together into this grayish, this green-gray thing here, and I kind of want to put that in there. Right now it's too green, so I'm going to kind of grab a dark gray and just start puffing that in there. Sort of desaturate the background a little bit with this gray. Oops. It's a little too gray, a little bit darker. Actually, I want this spatter brush. Spatter brush is my friend. So right now I'm just lightly tapping in this gray tone, this greenish gray, to sort of push back all of these background elements, blend them out so that you can still tell that there's something going on in the background, but it's not gonna distract your eye from what's going on in the foreground. Let's check out our references again. There's some light peeking through. I don't know if I want to... Well, shall I tap in some light? Maybe that looks too weird. Yeah, I don't know. I don't think I like the look of that. I don't know, I might revisit the lighting in the background. I kind of had the idea that this would be all sucked into darkness, and that you know, we really come out of the woods in this clearing. Here I've grabbed some blue to cool off the background a bit. I don't know, some of these light things are kind of working. Maybe throw in some different shapes going on in the background here. Alright, back out a little bit. So that's what we had. This is what with the overpaint. Still think there could be more detailing in the background. whoops, we have our spatter brush from our when we tapped in these leaves here. We'll put some of that in the background maybe. Get some variety out there. It creates a nice pattern. Breaks up the line quality a little bit. All right. Let's start working our way back up towards the foreground. What does this brush do? I don't like that one. Is this the one that I normally use? Don't like that one either. Yeah, let's change this. Other dynamics, opacity, jitter, fade, pen pressure. There we go. We kind of like that one. All right. So let's save that, and we'll call this dry brush, dry opacity brush. And we won't use that right now. But I thought I would create that just in case. All right. These tree trunks look way too green, so I'm gonna grab some of this darker brown and oops, and sort of tap that in here. This is a different tree trunk here. Oops. Sorry, I'm kind of lost in this. Normally I don't talk when I paint. And I'm especially nervous now because I really don't know where I'm going with this. I'm just kind of making it up as I go along. I'm trying to keep in mind to keep the colors muted, but I also want to create some definition. Like, there'd still be detail, it just wouldn't be as detailed as the foreground stuff. So right now I'm just kind of putting in some lines to indicate where the light would fall on the bark. And when I get up to this guy here, I'm going to be putting in more small details like that. But for the background, I just want some of these highlights to pop up just to give you the impression of what's going on. I don't want to get these trees too defined because I don't want to take away from the primary composition. Like, I don't want to have this really detailed tree coming out of the forehead of one of the cuties, because that's not the point of this painting. So it's trying to strike a delicate balance between detailing and not detailing. Let's use that other brush I just created. I'm just playing around with color and tone and shapes and stuff. I'm not doing too much with light because I want to kind of look at the overall the overall composition to really do some more lighting detailing. But I don't know. For now, we're getting places. Slowly but surely, we're getting places. One thing I try to avoid is doing the history undo, but sometimes it's unavoidable. Sometimes you do stuff and you want to take it back. I am not convinced that looks good. We had more stuff going on in this version. What did I screw up? We had some more of that stuff going on up at the top here. Alright, so let's try to tap some of that stuff in. These tree trunks do not look like tree trunks in the back. They kind of look like flat planes, don't they? So we need to round these out even though they are in the background. Some desaturated brown in here. Rounding out the trees, rounding out the trees, rounding out the trees. We got something going on here. It's not horrible. Could be better. But I don't terribly hate it too much. Maybe I should. I don't know. Screw it. Let's see what we've got now. Check that out. Save. Always save. There's some stuff going on. Got some bushes going on. Need a little bit more stuff in the bushes. Oh, I'm going to turn on lock. What is this called? Lock position. Because I don't want to accidentally move something as I'm switching quickly between my different keystrokes, my different hotkeys. Oops, this is not the, this is the one. It should be broken up a little bit more. not gonna get too caught up with that. Let's move on to these rocks. Oops. I don't want that. Now the rocks I've already kind of like the direction they're going, so I'm not going to do too much more with them. Maybe add in some more creases and stuff, more highlights. But I like their color tone. I like this sort of purpley, pinkish granite feel. Trick is to attempt to avoid getting too detailed. Alright, so I like this this dry brush thing here. We're gonna dry in some highlights. Oh. The other way to do texturing is, of course, to take photos and then set them to a channel and then start painting in details that way, which I might do later. There's some free texture sites out there that are really good for creating some neat stuff. But for now, I think I'll just get as far as I can with the default brushes that are in Photoshop, because I usually go with the theory that if you can't paint it, then you don't know what you're doing. Well, you learn more when you paint these details in yourself rather than just going with a texture that you find somewhere, or a fancy brush that you download somewhere. So I mean, custom brushes do cut down on time that you have to do stuff. Like these leaf things here, I could never have done as quickly if I wanted to paint it myself. So custom brushes do have their use, but I try not to rely on them too terribly much, because then your painting becomes a series of custom brushes, and it just looks artificial. Whereas if I paint in a lot of my details by hand, then it still has that appearance of handmade. Like your eye can tell when it's got a hand touch to it. It's this enigmatic quality that you can't really describe, but you know, you can tell when it's a filter or when somebody hand painted that stuff in. So yeah, it's just a personal thing. A lot of people save time, lots of time, and come up with some really great results using lots of custom brushes for texturing. And I often use photo textures myself, but I try not to rely on them. I try to paint as much as I can by hand. Or by computer, as it were. So, more tea. that's where they are. So this needs a little bit more to go on. The one thing that I really enjoy about using the overlay color the color overlay method is that you start off with a lot of big brushes and swatching huge swatches of color, um, and that gives you some nice detailed, nice color variation to work with. Like if you look at objects in nature, they're not one color. I mean, your eye perceives, oh yeah, or your brain perceives, oh yeah, that rock is gray. But the rock really isn't gray. Like if you take a look at a photo, the rock of the rock, let's do this. Let's take a look at the photo. Like this rock, you know, your mind classifies it as maybe gray, but you know it's not gray. You've got all these interesting browns and greens and tans, and there's some pinks in there and some other stuff, the blues and the shadows. So, um, you know, messing around with big brushes and throwing on huge swatches of color, with just a color layer opens you up to seeing all those different colors. Like I've got some pinks in here and some browns and some orange and stuff up here, and down here I've got more greens and other stuff and more variation. So you know, when you're painting something in an environment, try to incorporate a lot of color variation, because nature, the natural world has a lot of different colors and different tones and different hues, and they're not all one homogeneous thing. You know, there's no simple gray rock. It's all variations of different hues. I mean, and that's because, you know, everything, every surface has a reflective quality of it, and if there's light bouncing around, um, the objects next to it are going to pick up some of those colors. So color, paint with color. So one of the things that kind of stuck in my head when I first started doing coloring for comics is that, um, when you're working in Photoshop, the way you pick colors and the way you paint with the colors, they act like pigments would. So if you mix red and yellow, you get orange. Or if you mix, you know, red and blue, you get purple. And if you mix red, green, and blue, you get this dark dirt, brown, blackish color. Um, but the screwy thing is, the way your monitor displays color, it's all in RGB, it's all in light. So in one sense, you're painting with um, virtual pigments. Like, you know, these colors behave as they would if you were mixing acrylics or mixing oils or whatever, or temper paints, or whatever kind of medium you're working on. But the way the monitor displays it, it's all with light. So are you painting with light, or are you painting with tone? And that, it's sort of like a chicken and an egg question. And that boggled my mind for a good long while, and it messed with, well, it didn't really affect the way I did work, but it was a it was a philosophical question that was like, I'm painting with ones and zeros, and I'm painting with tones, but the monitor is spitting back out light in my eyes. So I'm doing both, kind of. I'm supremely glad that Photoshop does not treat RGB like light, because, if I was suddenly mixing light, I wouldn't know how to deal with it. Like, I'm really good with mixing paints and that kind of thing. I wouldn't be able to figure out if it was the other way around. Like, if you combined RGB and it turned out to be white light, white on the canvas, that would really screw up with my already demented process. Oh, I don't want to do that. So many shortcuts. So yeah, so you're kind of doing both. You're kind of painting with light and you're kind of painting with pigment. I would really love to see what kind of stuff George Seurat would be able to come up with if he were given digital medium, and if he were able to play with, real light, and if those kind of questions would bother him or blow his mind. He was the guy who did the pointillism. He was famous for pointillism. And there's a Stephen Sondheim musical called Sunday in the Park with George, which is, it's not one of his more well-known musicals, but it's one of my favorite. And it's sort of like a bio of George Seurat and as he was developing his pointillism technique and his relationship with a woman. But it talks a lot about color and light and his theories of how your eye mixes and perceives color. And I think it would be supremely interesting to go back in time and hand Seurat a Wacom tablet and say, "Hey, go wild, man." Just imagine what kind of crazy things he would have come up with. So right about now, if I was not filming this, I would be listening to iTunes Radio, and there are two old-time radio stations that I listen to. One is, I don't know the number, but it's Antioch, and at this time of night, they play mostly mystery or thriller or crime stories or science fiction. And those are great. There's also a radio station called Crime Time, and they do all thriller and mystery and noir stuff. And I really enjoy listening to those programs instead of music because I don't know, I tend to sing along with the songs, and I get up and dance, and when you're dancing you're not drawing, so but when it comes to listening to these old-time radio programs, it some strange reason it allows me to concentrate on just doing artwork and also trying to figure out who done it. But most of the time I'm just fascinated with the way the speed at which people talked in that era. The quick fire comments, the one-offs that the writers were coming up with would come up with. So yeah, I don't know, for some reason talk radio or old time radio helps me get into the mood more than listening to music does, which is weird because I know most artists are just the opposite. They prefer listening to music than hearing people talk. But it's just, I don't know, it's I loved listening to things like The Shadow and Sherlock Holmes. And so when I found that I was really excited when I discovered YouTube, not YouTube, iTunes Radio, and discovered that they had these old time channels and that they did nothing but stream old time radio. Um, Antioch does do some of the variety shows of the time, like the Jack Benny Show, and um, my mind is blanking on some of the other ones, but I don't enjoy those as much as Suspense or Murder at Midnight or Dark Fantasy, Dragnet, those kind of things. So, yeah, that's what I listen to when I'm not talking to myself. Or the cat. Where's the cat? Cat's behind me. She's asleep. So, yes, talking to myself. So, yeah, when I'm not talking to myself, I'm listening to old time radio. Because I'm a big, big dork. But the one thing I really enjoy about it is the storytelling, and you know, most of what I do relies on visuals, and with radio you can't see anything, so you have to use your imagination. And the way old time radio was able to manipulate your perception of what was going on with sound effects and subtle descriptions with through dialogue, and you know, inflections in the voice, those kinds of things, those are fascinating, because I really, you know, I don't miss not being able to see Philip Marlowe solving a mystery. It's, you know, I have a pretty solid vision of what's going on in my head, and that's solely due to, you know, the actors and the sound effects people and the Foley guys and all that stuff. And those programs were done live. You know, no rehearsals. They weren't pre-taped. So it's a different kind of on-the-spot acting, and it's just fascinating for me to hear all that come through. And after all these years, a lot of it stands up. It's not just old stuff. A lot of it stands up and still gets to you today. So that I really appreciate that as somebody who is interested in storytelling. All right, there's something going on with this brush. What other dynamics? Color dynamics. That's what was screwing me up. All right, so we'll save this as another version of it. We'll save that, and we'll get rid of this one. If you want to delete a brush from your brush menu, hit Option or Alt, and you'll see the scissors appear, and then you can cut it. Now it's behaving like I wanted to. Yes. All right, cool. Oh, I should probably get away from this tree trunk and move on to the other one. See, the problem with me is I tend to get tunnel vision when I'm working on something, and focus in on a little detail that I really don't need to be worried about. If I'm doing my job, the cuties will be the most noticeable thing in this composition. And they will instantly pop out at the viewer, and they'll either go, "Oh, that's cute," or, "Oh, that's really sick." Some rock out here. Oh, save. Don't forget to save. Now, if you are worried about file size and you want to save on file size, I will show you a pretty sweet trick. So let's take a look at our file size right now. We are at 123.5 megabytes. So if you want to save memory when you're saving, turn off all the layers, hit save, and now our file is down to 92 megs, which is even smaller than it was when I started out. And this is because Photoshop, when you turn off all the layers, Photoshop doesn't have to worry about rendering a preview. And for some reason that takes up a couple megs here and there. So if you want to save your memory if you want to shrink your file size without zipping it up, turn off all your layers when you save. And that will get rid of a couple of bytes here and there. It's not a revolutionary amount, and it's certainly not the same as zipping up a file, but in a pinch, it works wonders. And you can still screw around with your file, not worry about running out of memory. Let's get in some load here. More dark, more of the time. I try to avoid straight black as much as possible and straight white as much as possible, because I mean, those colors, those shades do exist in nature, but oftentimes they're surrounded by so much other stuff that they're tinted a little bit. Like, shadows aren't always pitch black. They're either tinted with a cool color or a warm color. You know, especially if you're talking about flesh tones, like your shadows are sometimes more saturated with strange hues than, you know, the stuff that's in the light. Light tends to wash things out, especially sunlight. So you know, I personally try to avoid using white even as a color to just lightly tap into something, because it just, to me, there are different ways of achieving that same tone without using straight white. Like this highlight here kind of looks like it could be white, but in actuality it's kind of a tannish thing here going on there. So a lot of what that has to deal with is the surrounding colors. This is dark, this is darker, so anything that's bright will bend towards whiteness. If you want to learn more about color, there's this really good book that's on my shelf that's all about color theory. Here, let me get up and grab it. Hold on. Here we go. It's called Principles of Color Design, Designing with Electronic Color. And it's by Wucius Wong. And it's probably the only textbook from college that I held on to. But it talks about lots of color theory goodness, like color wheels, color temperature, color moods, what colors go where, how you can determine that. Just all sorts of good stuff about just straight color theory. You don't need color theory to know how to learn how to paint with color. But it's if if color fascinates you more than just, hey, that color looks pretty. Um, Color theory is something that's pretty fun to study. I have not done my homework, and I've not studied it as much. I haven't poured through that book as much as I probably should have. But it is a great read. It's full of colorful examples of stuff, so it's not just a dry dissertation on the subject. It provides full color examples of everything. So I highly recommend it. My design professor highly recommended it too. This tree has a weird interaction with this rock. And I don't know why. But let's put a crack in there. Oops. See? Hit the wrong key. Sometimes you move things. That's why you want to turn off and lock the position. The shape doesn't look natural at all, but that's okay. Alright, gets rid of that stuff over here. You know what? I think I will use a texture brush at some point, or some photo textures. This is bogging me down. I'm spending way too much time on this area. Whoops. So ideally, I want to hop around my composition so that I work on everything, not at the same time, but I don't want to work on one thing too detailed at a time, just because you start to lose sight of the rest of your composition. And it all has to be harmonious and flow and make sense with the rest of it. So I'm attempting to tell myself to stop screwing with this part. Alright, stop. Okay, big tree over here. Let's grab this dark thing. I like that. This will be my major shadow condition. There are certain parts of my process that are pretty methodical, in terms of setting the background working on the background first and setting up the characters on a separate layer, that kind of thing. And then there are parts of my process that are completely haphazard, like the process that I'm going through now, adding detailing and coloring and things like that. And you may find that the way I work is completely incompatible with the way you work and the way you perceive things, and that's fine. The point is to explore and discover, ways for you to work the best for yourself, which is why I had a tough time taking art seriously in college. Um, I actually started college as a history major, and the thought of doing art for a living didn't really cross my mind until I got to junior year. And it was in junior year that I decided that history was not for me because I got to the point where I was arguing things that were completely irrational, but as long as I proved it or found enough proof, I would get a decent grade, you know. And I thought, well, if this field of study is all about storytelling, and if, I can make up a story, and if I can prove it, I pass, then how can I know if there's an objective truth to history? Because before I came to that realization, I figured, if you want objective truth, history is one of history. You can find objective truth through the study of history. I should have gone into science, but I don't have a brain for science or math. So I thought that history would be my way of finding objective truth in the world, and that was not the case. Like, there are serious fields of study into, um, you know, that people use to base Holocaust denial on, and I thought, well, if history can be used to deny the Holocaust, then this is kind of crazy. I don't want to continue to study this. So I decided to drop it and go into art without really thinking. I mean, it was sort of like, well, I draw all the time. I might as well do something that I enjoy and get a degree out of it. So I never really took my degree seriously because I was like, well, how do you grade somebody on their art? I mean, you look at these modern art galleries and there's stuff in there that I don't understand, and I consider myself to be an artist, and I just don't get a lot of stuff that's hanging in the the modern art wing of the National Gallery. I don't get it. I don't hate it, but I don't understand why some of these pieces are hanging in these galleries, and why some of the other stuff that I've seen would never be considered for a gallery. And that never made any sense to me. So, I was like, well, if I can't even figure out why these things are considered more worthy of public viewing than some of these other things that I've seen, how can you grade me on my work? What gives you the insight into my stuff to say whether or not it deserves a grade, like an A or a B or whatever. And so I never really took my classes terribly seriously, which, looking back, I kind of regret. Because what art school does give you is access to a lot of tools that you wouldn't necessarily have. Like, there's no room in my apartment for a giant easel to stick up a canvas and just go hog wild and paint. Like, I don't have access to I took a metalworking class. Now I don't have access to a welding torch or an acetylene torch, and there's no way I could get back into metal sculpture because I just don't have the room, and paying for studio space now is an exorbitant expense, especially if I'm not deriving an income directly from whatever I would be making. So college really gives you access to a lot of facilities that you wouldn't necessarily have access to, and I did not take full advantage of that. Like, I should have taken a screen printing course so I could learn how to screen print and do my own t-shirts. I did not do that. So now in hindsight, I kind of wish I had taken more advantage of what was around school. School is not for your grade, especially if you're going to art school. Your grade doesn't count for crap. School is for opening up your eyes and trying new mediums, and getting into different techniques, and learning different ways of approaching something. Um, And I think I was too stubborn at the point. Now I am too old, I guess. Well, not old, but I'm already set in a career path, and I have a goal in mind on how to eventually become an independent artist. And so I feel like going back to school would be a step back from all of that. And I don't want to stop. I feel like I've wasted so much time already that I don't want to slow down and go back to school and put a pause on all of that stuff. I don't want to have to deal with professors. I don't want to have to deal with assignments. I just want to create and get stuff out there and plug away and get going, man. I just want to get going. Um, so that's why I'm not in school. The other thing that school is good for is making connections, and there are a lot of professional connections that you can make through your professors, because a lot of times your professors, well, at least when you go to art school, they are artists themselves or former artists themselves, and have connections to professional organizations and people that might be able to who might be able to give you work, whoops, in college or when you get out of college. And so those are resources that you need to keep in touch with. I'm supremely annoyed with myself that I didn't stay in touch with the design professor who who recommended that book that I was just mentioning, the art, the color design book. He was a great design professor. He worked on lots of cool projects, like he did some furniture design. He did murals. He did stuff for Ducati. I mean, and at the time I thought, that's really cool. He's a really cool guy. He pushes me. I'm learning a lot in his classes. But I didn't I didn't follow through. I didn't keep up with that connection. And the last time I tried to look him up, he had retired, and there was no way for me to get in touch with him. So, if you are in college now, don't be a cocky asshole like me. Stay in touch with your professors that you really connect with and that you really learn with, because they can give you career advice, which is something that they don't focus on in most art colleges. Most art schools focus on the technique, the process, the actual making of the stuff, but they don't talk about things like, how do you approach a potential client? How do you stick to a deadline? How do you deal with client changes? And how do you maintain those relationships? These are things that your professors know but aren't necessarily teaching you, because that's not part of their curriculum, which is stupid. I mean, ultimately, if they're training artists, they should also be training them in the arts of business. And maybe I just missed out on those courses in the catalog, but I could use that now. I could definitely use help on learning the ropes about business management and marketing especially, getting my stuff out there, meeting people, networking, that kind of thing. And those are things that your professors will know how to do or have had experience doing and might be doing it now, and they can tell you about them. You just have to ask. I didn't. And for that, I am supremely stupid. So, again with the philosophizing. I mean, it's true that the internet kind of levels the playing field. Like, now, anyone can put a portfolio up online and reach people and get their work in front of people and send out postcards and direct them to a website. But you have to know where to start. You can't just throw stuff out there to the wind and not pay attention. So, let's see. All right, I kind of like what's going on here and here and here. I'm not so sure. I'm not so sure about this stuff. in the middle here, it's kind of doesn't relate. It's kind of too green. Maybe if I, oops, let's go back here. Maybe if I gray it up a little bit, desaturate it a little bit. Eh. Try a different layer and maybe do this. Hmm. Yeah, I do kind of like that gray in the background. Let me erase some of it with the big eraser here. Maybe I can pretend it's like misted in. Get rid of some of that there. Bring it back in here a little bit. All right, I'm gonna stop here. Let's call this like mist background. I'm gonna stop here for now because I think I've gone about an hour. And next time I think I'll keep going with the background. I need to put some crap on the floor or the ground, some leaves and stuff. So let's take a look. It's not bad. It's not bad. I don't hate it. I have a lot more work I can do. But let's see what it looks like before. So this is before, and this is now. So it's getting there. Things are happening. Alright, so thanks again for tuning in to Monster Cutie. I hope you're getting something out of this. And I hope that this turns into something that I will be able to use. Alright, thanks for watching.